Hey everyone, welcome to my live stream. I'm very excited today because I have a lot of really interesting stuff to talk about. As you can see from my screen, this new article has just come out in the New York Times regarding scans, 3D scans of ant models. And this is something, if you know me, I've been working on this kind of thing for many, many years now. So I wanted to talk about this article and also talk about what this means for those of us who are into insect sculpting, or if you need to sculpt insect-related creatures for a movie or TV show, etc., whatever. First thing I want to stress: these are not my models right here. These are models that were created by AntScan, so I don't want people to assume that these are mine. I don't want to take credit for work I didn't do. These are very nice, almost as good as the ones that I do on a regular basis. Haha. But what's cool about this is this New York Times article, which just came out, and I can't tell you how many people have already sent me a link to this article. Just came out this weekend, and it talks about how this scientist has been scanning insects, specifically ants, using this technique, which is basically like using a extremely micro CT scanners, which are not something that you commonly find. This is very sophisticated equipment. This is not Gaussian splatter or anything like that. This is basically using extremely high-end scanning and our artificial intelligence to create these scans. Sorry, I'm tripping up on my words because I'm just so excited today. The really cool thing about it is, number one, I've actually worked with some of the scientists with some of these scans already. A few years ago, I did a workshop, an online workshop with Thomas Vanderkamp, and I used some of his scans to create some models. So I've been aware of this technology for a few years now, and if you go to my website, you can actually see some of the models that I created using this high-quality scan data. So I have some flies in here. And these are created in ZBrush. I think these are rendered in Redshift for Maya. And I have a few more on here, like this guy right here. So these are anatomically correct models, and again, they're made from that high quality scan data. I did the poly painting, cleaned up the models, and added the hair, etc., and did the renderings. So here's a few more of them. A lot of fun to do. And I've also used scan data to create models. Like I did a project for CDM Studio Perth in Australia. So this is not me. This is, obviously you can see me in the video. I don't look like this. But this is one of my models that's been 3D printed at this enormous size. And they actually did some of my ants. I sculpted some of these too. And some of these come from scan data, and some of these come from, I model from scratch using various reference. So it's a really fun process, and as I was saying, if you're looking at this article in the New York Times, very interesting about the technology, it has a link to the website, the Ant Lab website, AntScan website rather, AntScan. Ant Lab is something different. AntScan. So here's a website that talks about the project and a list of all the scan data that's available. If you go up here and click on the metadata download, if you click on the AntScan database at Biomedia, so Biomedia is the group that I worked with in creating some of these scans right here. And what's cool is, you go down here, all of these are links to scan data, and you can download these in the STL format. Yeah, I know, for some reason I'm not a huge fan of flies either. I like most other insects, even cockroaches, but flies give me the heebie-jeebies. But ants are way cool. So you can click on one of these guys and download it as STL format. Now, here's the thing that I want to point out. Look at how mangled these are. This is what the scans actually look like. If you look at the New York Times article, as usual, they kind of gloss over it and make it look like this is what you get out of the scan. This is not what you get out of the scan. You get a crumpled up, shriveled ant, and an artist, someone like myself, takes this into software like ZBrush and turns it into something usable and animatable. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. So I'm going to go through the process of how I clean up scan data. And I'm going to use one of their ant models as a reference, specifically Acanthroponera mucronata. And if you click right here, you can see information on the scan, how it was done, when it was done. You can even see a little movie that shows it's a cross section. That's the cool thing about these scans, as opposed to photogrammetry or something like that. You actually get the inside of the model, not just the outside, which is actually leading to discoveries. So I've downloaded this model and just clicked on the link and downloaded STL format. So let's start with a blank ZBrush scene, and I'll go ahead and import the model. So to bring an STL model into ZBrush, you can use the 3D Print Hub plugin. So I'm going to Z plugin 3D Print Hub. You guys can tell I've had a fair amount of coffee already this morning. And click on Import STL format, and here it is. Here's the actual ant scan. I'll press F to zoom in on it, and we can see a number of things. First of all, it's way off on the grid. It's all shriveled up. It's asymmetrical. But in terms of the quality of the scan, this is really nice. A lot of times when you get scan data, especially from photogrammetry, it can have all kinds of schmutz on it and that kind of stuff. But this is fairly clean. If you take a look at the geometry, you can see it's kind of like what you'd expect out of a decimated or scanned model, right? We have a lot of triangles, and it's not symmetrical, and it's not something you'd want to animate directly. If we take a look, the number of points in this looks about around 2 million, so that's not bad. Sometimes I'll get a scan data, it'll be like 50 million points or something like that, which can be a real pain to work with. So what we need to do as ZBrush artists, if we want to use this, is we've got to place this on the grid at the center, separate it into different parts, and then make it symmetrical. And that's what I'm going to go over in the next few weeks with this particular model to show you my entire process. Now, you might be saying, Eric, why would you do that? You're giving away so many of your secrets. Well, yes, I am, but I'm not going to give all of them away. But the other thing is that there are millions and millions and millions of insects out there, and we could all benefit from creating libraries of these things. Okay, so if you rewind to the beginning of this video, the place I got the scan data, it's very exciting because this is all available now for free in the Biomedcia website. So again, just to do a quick review, New York Times article came out over this weekend talking about ant scan data that is now accessible and how it's created using this very sophisticated equipment and combined with artificial intelligence. And there's a link to the AntScan website. So if you go to antscan.info, and then click on the link right here, AntScan database on Biomedcia. Biomedcia is a group that does the actual scanning. Thomas Vanderkamp is the one who's been leading this group, and he's done some amazing, amazing scans. I worked with him before a few years ago. You can click on any one of these links to download it STL format and then use the 3D Print Hub plugin under Z plugins to bring it into ZBrush. Hopefully that answers your question. So first thing we want to do, I want to bring this into center this on the grid. And so I'll activate the gizmo by pressing W, and then I'm going to hold the Alt key and click on this button right here, which is going to attempt to put the gizmo at the center of the data. All right, center of the bounding box. So now we're going to have to manipulate it to get it a little bit closer to what we consider the center. And of course it's difficult because this girl, this is a worker, so it's a sterile female, is all shriveled up. So let's use the thorax, because the thorax is a nice, straight, obvious, symmetrical part. Even has this nice center line that we can use as a guide. So I'm going to hold the Alt key and move the gizmo closer to the center. Let's turn off symmetry. Make sure symmetry is not on at the moment. And you can Alt click right here to snap it to a point. That's a fast way to get it to the place you want it to go. And then I can hold the Alt key and just start to use the rotate options while holding the Alt key to align the gizmo a little bit better with that geometry. What I want to do is I want to find the center point of where I'm going to put it on the grid. So usually I'm going to hold the Alt key and maybe put it somewhere like around here, close to the center of the thorax. Again, hold the Alt key and just move it around and rotate it and get it close. And use that line as a guide. I'm going to click on the home button here, which is going to send the model closer to the center of the grid. It's especially helpful if the model is way off. And these models can come in all sorts of different scales, so it's something to be aware of. But I'm not going to worry about the scale just yet. I'm just going to worry about getting this centered on the grid. So now I'm not holding the Alt key. Closed holes functions. Well, I'm going to work on getting the model set up before I worry about closing the holes, because the close hole function does work, but in this state right now it's a little bit early to do that, especially because we have some parts that aren't closed holes. The other thing you have to realize with this scan data, as I mentioned before, it's very complex. If I hide part of it, oh, actually this one does not have the interior anatomy. Sometimes they have the interior anatomy, which can make closed holes a little bit more difficult to calculate. What I'm going to do first is separate this into subtools and then close the holes on those subtools. That's a much easier way to go. So let's worry about separating this into usable pieces first, and then we'll close the holes. So let's see. Okay. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and turn off the grid is snapping to the bounding box, which is kind of throwing me off. So I'm going to turn off snap so that the grid is always at the center here. Let's do this. I'm going to make the background darker, and under preferences, let's see if I can get the grid to be a little bit easier to see. Because I don't want to spend all my time digging through here to find the grid options. Actually, it might be in the draw. Yeah, I think it's in draw. There we go. Frame opacity. I can make the grid a lot easier to see by going into draw. Under the grid options, modifiers, frame opacity. So there we go. That makes things a little bit easier. Now I'm going to align this thorax, not worry about the rest of the model. With this kind of thing, you want to take it slowly, one step at a time, because it can get overwhelming very, very quickly if you try and do too much at once. And I have done this process, I don't know how many, dozens and dozens and dozens of times, so I'm fairly used to it. Next thing I'm going to do is if I turn on the polyframe, I'm going to turn off line so we just see the fill. We could go in here and try and make auto groups. In this case, everything is a single mesh, so we're going to have to separate this manually in order to get the different pieces there. So this could be a little bit tricky, so let's start with the easier parts. And I'm going to switch to the Select Lasso tool. And let's see, what's going to be the easiest thing to grab? The head's not bad, so I'm going to do this. Let's hold Control and Shift, drag over here, just kind of randomly. Hold the Alt key just to make that stuff hide it for the moment. Control Shift, drag over here, Alt key, hide that. Control Shift, hold the Alt key, hide that. There we go. Now we have mostly the head. We've got a few stray parts here that we need to hide. So it's like this kind of thing right here is what's going to make it very difficult just to use the closed holes. So you want to clean up the model first and then use closed holes. And especially if you're trying to print this thing. Just printing this in this state is going to be a bit of a nightmare. The other thing I like to do is go down here to display properties and turn on double. That makes things easier to see. So we're just whittling this down, and we're going to do this over the entire surface of the body for every different part. Doesn't have to be super precise at this moment because there's going to be a lot of cleanup going on. Just want to make sure that you don't delete anything that you don't want to delete. So like this stuff I'm not going to worry about at the moment. We can fix that when we get into the Dynamesh phase. And then we're going to go here and just position this so it's a little bit easier to see. Okay, so we have the head. We're going to separate out the antenna and the mandibles in a little bit, but right now I'll just worry about the head. One thing I do want to do though is I want to go into the subtools. I'm going to duplicate this subtool. So right now this is the entire ant with just some parts hidden. So I'm going to duplicate this, right? So we can hide this. So this is my original scan. So I'm going to rename this and call it original scan. It's always a good idea to keep the original scan as a separate subtool, so you can go back to it in case you delete something by accident or you want some 3D reference. And my keyboard has switched to France. Okay, hold on a second. Let's go back to English. Thank you. Okay. Let's try that again. Rename. There we go. Let's go to this one. Let's turn on the solo button. So right now I've hidden everything but this. I'm going to press Control W just to create a polygroup here. If I do Control Shift to bring everything back, you can see that I have a polygroup just for the head and a polygroup for the body. So I'm going to Control Shift click on this to hide everything like this. And I'll go down to Split and I'm going to choose Split Hidden. So now I have a subtool for the head and a subtool for the body. And I also have my original scan right here. Actually, let's do this. Let's do Control W. So my original scan also has polygroups. And it's also a good idea to save at this point. So we're going to save this. Real quick. Okay. So here we are. At this stage we have a subtool for our original scan that is at the center of the grid for the most part. We have a subtool for the head and a subtool for the body. So now we're going to continue chopping up the body into subtools. So let's do the thorax next. So again, I'm going to hold Control and Shift and just drag kind of randomly, hold the Alt key and clear this out. This right here is the pedial. I'm going to hide that, but let's hide some of these leg parts real quick. This one has some really cool parts on it. Cool anatomy on the legs. This is the coccyx for the legs. So we want to think about what our goal is in this model. Our goal is to come up with a model that is symmetrical, accurate, something that we can create better topology, something that could be rigged for animation or converted into a printable version. Either way, you know, it's like if I'm doing something for 3D print, like those models I showed earlier, a lot of times they want the models to be posed for like a museum display or something like that. It's much easier to pose the model if you have something that's sort of symmetrical in the insect equivalent of the T-pose, which 6 legs is not really a T-pose, but you know, something where we have a default pose is going to make it a lot easier to then create variations based on that than to try and just drag the geometry around sort of randomly in hopes that you get it right. So the thing about this is this really cool pattern on here is asymmetrical. If I just make this part symmetrical, there's a good chance I'm going to lose some of that, but you can always bring it back through projection. So projection is your best friend in ZBrush. Okay, so now we have this. This is also, I mean, these scans are just so great because, you know, there's been scans available on, you know, like Fab and Megascans and Sketchfab for a while, but usually they're created from photogrammetry and they could be not very high quality. This is pretty darn high quality. If I hide something that I don't want to by mistake, it's no big deal. That's why I have that original scan. So if I can go back and always double check the anatomy with that original scan at any time. But you can see I'm going to be leaving a lot of these holes open, and I'll close those later. The other thing I can do is I'm going to go down to polygroups here, and I'm going to find regroup visible. So this is going to create new polygroups based on what's visible and the existing polygroup. So you can see I have little bits and pieces here of the interior anatomy left over. I'm going to eliminate those, but I want to keep them as polygroup, but I also don't want to, you know, undo all the work that I did hiding the legs and that kind of stuff. So if I do regroup visible, now I have new polygroups indicated by the colors. If I do Control and Shift and unhide everything, see how the legs and the abdomen are still a different polygroup, so that makes life easier because I always just hide this, or actually what I'll do is, I'm going to Control Shift click on this, so that hides everything including those other stray polygroups. Don't worry about this at the moment that were in there. And now what I could do is, again, I like to use split hidden. It's a nice way to split up the hidden parts of the model into separate subtools. It's not very destructive. So let's save this so don't lose any of our work. Probably a good idea to start renaming these. So I'll rename this head. Rename this Thorax. And then this I'm still working on. And let's save this. So now let's see, what's the next easiest thing? Probably the pediole is probably the next easiest thing to isolate. That's this part right here. Some ants have one, other ants have two, but it's between the thorax and the abdomen. In some really terrible ant models I've seen CG artists do, they'll have legs coming out of this part. The legs always come out of the thorax. They don't come out of the abdomen. They always come out of the thorax on all insects. Please stop making that mistake. It's irritating. Okay. We'll piece the leg right here. Do Control W. Create a polygroup there. That's always useful in case you accidentally bring everything back, you know. So this, and I will do split hit. And let's rename this. And you can see this, the more we whittle down, the easier it gets. The abdomen's going to be a little bit of a challenge here, but I think it's easier than trying to do the legs. I believe this right here is just a bit of schmutz or poop that was part of the scan here. So we're going to have to just kind of chop this away gradually. So what I'll do is, well, what we could do is hide the abdomen and then do split hidden, and then it'll be its own subtool, because I think that's easier than dealing with this tangle of legs right here. So I'm just going to hold Alt to hide that. Autosave is an opportunity. If you're a creature artist, you are doing bugs for a movie or something like that, somebody's for a TV show, somebody's actually hired you, which happens to me every once in a while, please take the time to learn some insect anatomy. It's just as important as learning human anatomy. And your sculpts and designs will be better because of it. You would never see a character artist just making up anatomy for a human character. They get torn to pieces online, right? Should be the same for all animals. Shouldn't have the same standards, in my opinion. Okay, so now we've hidden the abdomen for the most part. I think that's pretty good. So we'll go down here, split hidden. Now we have the abdomen, so we'll rename this abdomen. And now gets the tricky part. So let's save this. So what I think I'm going to do is create a subtool for each individual leg. Eventually what we're going to do, this is an ant that I'm using from AntScan. I downloaded the scan data from AntScan. High quality scan data available for free. Check out AntScan website, click on the link. There's literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of ant scans that are available now. This is just recently released, so this is new material. And I'm showing you my process for cleaning up the scan data to make a usable, animatable, printable ant model based on that scan data. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a subtool for each individual leg here. And then what we'll do is what I'll do is make a decision over which legs are the best ones to use when I make this symmetrical. So for example, this leg right here is a really good one because it's not too twisted, and it's not tangled or intersecting with or joining with any of the other legs. So that's a really good one to use. A couple of tricks I want to show you. What I can do is I'm going to hide everything but this. Go down under visibility. There's this grow and shrink point, and it shows you the hotkey right here. Control-Shift-X will allow you to grow the visibility. So if I do this, you see how it's growing the model right there. This is a fairly dense model. It's going to take a little while, but if you're trying to, if you look right here and you have parts of the model that are kind of hard to get to with the select tool, that can be a really useful option. So I think what might be easier to do is, rather than isolate this leg, I will hide this leg because that's easier to do. So I'll just do this, Alt. Again, you don't have to worry about being like super precise because the subtools can always be merged and joined together again. So if you miss a few spots here, it's not the end of the world. Like this little hole right here, I'm not going to lose any sleep over that because that's easy to fix later. So I've got that one hidden. So I'll go in here and I'll choose split hidden. So now I have this leg isolated. A little bit of extra pieces here and there, no big deal. So let's do that with some of these other legs right here. This one seems to be a fairly easy one to do. Control Shift, drag the lasso, hold the Alt key to hide it. Go down here to the coxa. Oh, I think I missed the coxa on this one leg. That's okay. The coxa is the first segment, the one that attaches the leg to the thorax. Alright, so we have that. So I'll go split hidden. Take a look at this leg right here. That's the result. I missed a part, no big deal. Yeah, this is missing the coxa right here. Let's go back to the legs. Ah, yeah, it's right here. So I'm going to Control Shift, hide this, do split hidden. Now I have this piece and this piece right here. Let's turn off solo, and we'll hold Shift and hide everything else. Turn these two on. So I accidentally left, this is what I mean why it's no big deal. I accidentally separated this part. So I have those subtools selected and everything else hidden. I'll just select this one and choose merge down. Just like merging layers in Photoshop. Now that's back to being one subtool, and we'll dynamesh it later. So it's the same thing right here. I missed a part. Let's hide this. The coxa right here. Which one is it? It's this one right here. Yeah. I missed this in the other leg. You can see the little part of the leg coming out here. Again, no big deal. I'm going to hide everything but this. Control Shift. Oops. And now that all this scan data is made available free to the public, I don't want to see any more ants with bad anatomy. Any more that you want to see your superheroes with bad anatomy, right? It's offensive. Get your anatomy right. If you took all the ants in the world, all the ant species, and weighed their and measured their mass, and then measured the mass of all the people in the world, they come out to be about the same. That means that ants are just as important as people, right? I know y'all think I'm crazy. I'm not crazy, you're crazy. Let's do split hidden. So now I have that coxa part right there and this leg right here. So let's move this up. Do this and this, select this, and we'll just do merge down. Just because I missed a part when I missed this when I was isolating that leg. Okay. Let's save this. Okay, go back to our pile of mess of legs. It gets faster because obviously we're getting fewer and fewer parts and they're easier to select. So let's get rid of this schmutz here, this goo, this poop, whatever it is. Hold the Alt key down. Whoops. This Alt key can be a little sticky sometimes. There we go. It is interesting because this is a situation where, you know, usually in my live stream, it always ends up in a discussion of AI. Today is no exception. So this is an area where AI is going to become increasingly useful in terms of scientific visualization. and filling in some of those parts that are hard for it. So this process is going to get easier and easier as time goes on with AI. It's a little bit disappointing because I find this a lot of fun to do, but at the same time, imagine creating a database of all the insects on the planet. Something where, for research, that's incredibly valuable. We haven't discovered all the insects on the planet, so that's not really going to happen anytime soon. But processing millions and millions and millions of insects this way, the 3D data, is time consuming. So this is an area where AI will make that much, much easier, much, much faster. Is it going to put me out of work? I don't know. I do more things than just this for a living. But also, you need some people who understand how to use the AI correctly. So the AI is just as capable of making mistakes, maybe even more so than human beings. So, it's kind of an interesting subject. So let's do split hidden. We have this leg, we have this leg, we got schmutz, and we got this. Okay, let's save it. I'm gonna rename this schmutz. Let's put it in a folder, and I'm gonna call that folder garbage. Eventually we're going to delete all the stuff that's in there, but until I'm sure that I've got everything sorted out, I'm not going to delete it just yet. But that way we have it, we know we can delete it later on. Okay, so the legs. Yeah, let's save this. Excuse me. I like to start to put these guys in folders, so I have a folder for legs, a folder for abdomen, folder for head, because I'm going to split these further into different parts. So this is a little bit tricky, but it's not too bad. What we can do here is look at what's connected. Okay, so this leg is pretty much connected, so I'm going to do Control and Shift and isolate this part of the leg, and then I'm going to use Control Shift X and just hit it so that I can grow that selection until I have the whole leg. Now if this is sort of merged or joined with part of another leg, then it'll require a little bit more cleanup, but this is just one way to get to those tricky parts and unhide them so that you can select them more easily. It's just like playing Asteroids back in the day, for those Gen Xers out there. I used to pay $0.25 to hit buttons this fast. Let's see. This is probably going to start unhiding other parts of the model. That's not too bad. All right. Now this is fascinating television. There we go. Get that foot. A little bit of something else in there. Okay. That's pretty good. Not fun to watch, but works in the pinch. See how I got the, what do you call it, the claw of the feet in there, and there's the foot, there's the whole leg. And so now what I'm going to do is, let's press Control W just to create a polygroup, and a Control Shift to bring everything back. That way we can see if we got pretty much the whole leg. And we did. A little extra stuff here and there, but no big deal. Control Shift click to isolate this, and then we'll do Split Hidden. Alright. Now we're almost there. Getting close. Let's save it. Only 3 more legs to do. These should be fairly fast. Do Control Shift. Hold the Alt key. Hide that. Control Shift, drag out lasso. Hold the Alt key. Hide. Whoops. hold the Alt key. This one's nice and fast. Hold the space bar to move the selection, hold the Alt key to hide it. I think that's part of it. Oops. Should quickly polygroup that, and then we'll do split hidden. Now we only got 2 legs left. Pretty cool, huh? So Control Shift, select around here, hold the Alt key. I mentioned before on this live stream, learning how to clean up scan data is an incredibly important job skill. Even if you're working in the entertainment industry, a lot of times I end up cleaning up scan data props from a movie and using that for CG models. Not most fascinating work in the world, but pays the bills. Okay, so now we have that. Now we do split hidden. And now we have our legs. So I'm going to create a new folder for the legs. I'll select this one, do new folder, call it legs. The legs on this one are really nice in terms of scan data. They're very clean. If you're working with a bee or a fuzzy insect, it could be a lot more difficult because a lot of stuff gets caught in the fur. I think this is one of the reasons why they're using ants, because ants do have a lot of hair, but not as much as bees. So they tend to be a bit cleaner and easier to work with than other insect models. So now we have our legs subtools. Should have 6 legs. There we go. And they're all separated out. So what I'm going to do now, let's save this. And here's our original scan. Going to keep that around. Here's our head. Here's our thorax. Here's our pedial. Here's our abdomen. And then we have our legs. And then we have our garbage down here, which is just this little blob of schmutz. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this. Always I want to have a backup. Let's version up. We could just do save next, or I'll do save as. Doesn't matter. And I'll save this as 2. Now I can safely delete things, and if I delete something I don't want to delete, I'm going to just go back to earlier version, or use the scan data right here. So now I'm going to go to this garbage folder and click on the gear icon and choose delete all. That's going to delete the folder and the contents, so no longer have schmutz. And let's work with the head here. And I think what I'm going to do is now I'm going to start to position these parts so that they're more aligned with the grid, so that we can think about making them more symmetrical. And again, this model, you can see the details on here. They are asymmetrical details. Surprisingly more symmetrical than you might think, but they're still asymmetrical. So I don't necessarily want to destroy that by doing a merge and my brain stopped there for a second. Mirror and weld. However, at the same time, I do want to make the model symmetrical so it's easier to rig. So what I can do is I can rotate this, separate the main part of the head, keep that as a backup, create a mirror and weld, and then project these details, these asymmetrical details, on the final version, or use it as a reference to sculpt those details back in. Because it'll be much easier to create a nice topology if I have a symmetrical model. So I think the first thing I'm going to do is take off the mouth parts and the antenna and even the eyes, and then we can, as was asked before, we can close this up and make it symmetrical and all that kind of good stuff. But I think the first thing we want to do is make sure that this is aligned with the grid. So I'm going to place the gizmo at the center. I don't want to move it too much because I don't want to keep it too far from the body, but let's see if we just start to rotate it a little bit. And anytime I want to realign the gizmo, just hold the Alt key. Excuse me. Click on this button right here. That realigns the rotation. And just making small changes, nothing huge. And you can also test it by just hitting that mirror and weld button. Just to double check, see how close it is. Let's turn this off so it's easier to see what's going on. So Control undo. Escape button is not working. Thank you, ZBrush. No, drink a little coffee. So it's been about 45 minutes, and we already have our model split up into various parts, so that's not too bad. Main thing I want to do when I'm doing a mirror and weld is I want to check that it's close to the center line of the grid, and that, like, if I'm doing this kind of thing, I'm not getting this stuff in the middle, or it's getting too wide. So just that's pretty good right there. So you can see overall the shape is not changing too much. The same size is about the same when I hit mirror and weld. I'm going to undo that and make a copy of the subtool, so I have something to project from. Let's make a folder. We'll call this head. We'll rename this original head. Just keep it there for projection or reference. Then I'm going to duplicate this, and we'll call this symmetrized. I made up that word, head. And now for this one, I'm going to do mirror and weld. I think that's close enough for jazz. We can always fix it later. You can see none of the mouth parts are joined with each other in the middle, so they have a nice bit of separation there. And we could always rotate and change their position later. So now what I want to do is I want to separate the antenna and the mandibles and the mouth parts and the eyes from the head to keep it all in that eye folder. So let's start with the antenna. I have symmetry turned on now. Let's see. This is a good example of the Control-Shift-X technique. So I'm going to Control and Shift, and isolate that, and then do Control-Shift-X. Okay, that might take a while. Let's do this. Yeah, this is better. The eye is something I'm going to completely reconstruct, so don't worry about the eye too much. I love this where you can see the actual place where it joins in. So this is a little bit hard to separate using the just selection technique, so this is where masking comes in handy. So I've hidden everything. Let's see, I'll hide this part right here. And let's switch over to this material so it's easier to see. So just a little bit right here. Let's hide that, then do Control W. Now it's a poly group. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint a mask on this part right here. So I'll hold the control key and let's make the brush size a little bigger. I'm just going to paint a mask on that section of the antenna where it joins the head. Alright, something like that. Paint my mask. And paint this right here. Just be a little bit picky. And I'll do Control W to create a polygroup. Let's undo that and hold quickly. Erase this mask by holding Control and Alt. Control W. There we go. Get that as a polygroup. Now I can Control Shift click on this to hide it. So now this is its own polygroup. Everything else from the antenna is hidden. So we'll go into Subtools and Split Hidden. And now I've got a subtool for the antenna. One for the head. Let's quickly take care of the eyes here. Actually, I'm not going to worry about the eyes just yet. Let's worry about the mandibles. It looks like this is a stray part. Again, I think this is going to, using masking is going to make this a little bit easier. Just remember, we're going to be sculpting a lot, resculpting a lot of these details later. So, and you might think you'd never be in a situation where you have to do this quickly, but that's actually not true. I've had jobs where they had a tight deadline on a whole bunch of different models, like, you know, like 10 or 15 insect models that I had to do like within the span of a few weeks. So you have to learn how to do this kind of stuff quickly. And these kinds of techniques are pretty good. Make it faster for you. Control W, and then Control Shift click on this to hide it. Don't worry about those little pits. Split hidden. Now we got our mandibles. Alright. Now we got our head. That's our original head. Here's our head that we're working on. So let's hide the mouth parts. So let's do this. How much detail you want to get into is kind of up to you. I mean, in terms of like what parts of the mouth parts you want to separate. I've had scan data where it had even much more detail than this. Control Shift, hide that. Hide that. Control W, Control Shift click on this, and Control W to make another polygroup, and we'll do Split Hidden. So now we have our mouth parts right here, a little bit of extra stuff. We probably can clean that up later. So we almost got our head here finished, and I think what I'm going to do is, I can leave the eyes here, but I am going to create separate geometry on top of these eyes. So I'll just leave them the way they are for now, because this gives you a good idea of the size of the ommatidia, which are the lenses that you see on the eye. So let's keep that and let's save this. And now we get to the point where we want to close holes, right? So I'm going to first, there's a lot of extra little pieces here that you can see. I want to hide those before I try and close holes, otherwise it's going to mess up the calculation and we're going to have a disaster. So what we can do is we can go down to polygroups, and I'm going to do auto groups, which if I turn on flat color, you can see now it's created a polygroup for each individual unconnected mesh. So now what I can do is Control Shift click on the big red one. Let's do this. Auto groups. I'm going to switch over to select rect. Makes it easier to Control Shift click on this. That hides all the non-green polygroups, and I can choose geometry, modify topology, delete hidden. So now I'm just left with this. I'm just turning on these different materials so it's easier to see what I'm talking about. So now I just have a single polygroup for this mesh, which is the head that has holes in it. Now, this is the point where you want to do close holes. So if I go in here and say modify topology, close holes, now it works. It's not super neat because it's just filling in geometry as best as it can. You can see it's kind of this, it looks like this, but now it's closed. Of course, I don't want to stop there because I do want to dynamesh this so I can kind of sculpt, get a more of a clean sculpt in here because I don't want this stuff, right? That's gross. And I will do another mirror and weld to make sure it's symmetrical. And we're also going to do a Z-remesh to simplify the geometry. So that's why I'm not too worried about losing this detail, because I can project or sculpt that back in later on. That's why I kept that backup head. So there's some artistry involved in this after all. It's not just clicking buttons. So let's save this. And we're going to do a Dynamesh. So with the Dynamesh options, if I just hit Dynamesh with the default, you can see it's fairly low poly. We get about 6,000. That's a little bit too low, so I'm going to undo that. And let's bring this up to like 512 and see how that looks. So that's me about 115,000, but the detail is fairly intact. So I think that's pretty good. I'm going to turn on my blue material because I think it's easier to sculpt that way. And I'm going to bring in my clay tubes and just start kind of cleaning this up a little bit. You know, I could go on to the other parts and clean and separate them out some more, but let's do some sculpting because that's more interesting to watch. So I'm going to use clay tubes. I'm going to lower the Z intensity, and also I'm going to turn on backface masking. So go down here to brush, auto masking, backface mask, and I have symmetry on. So I can just start smoothing this out. You could use sculptress mode if you wanted to. I'm just going to keep it simple. My goal here is to clean it up enough so I can do a nice quick Z remesh. In fact, this is probably even more work than I need to do, so that I get a clean topology. Now, the nice thing about working with insects is the topology. You can get away with a lot in terms of the topology, because if I was going to animate this, we're not doing facial expressions, right? It's just going to be a solid object, just like part of a robot. So as long as I have UVs that are clean enough to say, help make decent UVs and textures and easy to rig, that's what I'm mostly concerned about, and support the detail, any detail that I might be using displacement for. So in this Dynamesh phase, you can see what I'm doing is I'm just going in here and just cleaning up some of these little parts. And I'm using the inflate tool to kind of inflate the thin parts. That also helps close these holes. And then every time I want to re-Dynamesh, I'll just control, drag, and release, and that recalculates the surface. So I want to get rid of these little divots, especially if you're doing 3D printing. That's the kind of thing that's going to keep it from being a watertight mesh later on. If you have little channels and valleys that are unseen parts, that can be difficult to deal with. So you can just deal with it now. And you can see I'm also closing off any of these tiny little holes. So this right here, just being very gentle about it, again, we're going to be doing a Z-remesh, so you don't have to worry about the detail. Detail can always be brought back through projection and sculpting. Let's smooth this out a little bit. I'm going to smooth out this detail because I'm going to reproject it later. Just want to keep the major form there as much as possible. Okay, so now I have this kind of soft, smooth glob, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to control click on the history right here, store that history state, and go into Z-remesher, and let's just set this to half, and do a Z-remesh. Now, this is going to be just sort of ZBrush's attempt at doing a Z-remesh, which is not too bad. We can kind of control the topology a little bit using polygroups here. So I'm going to mask off the eye here. Neaten this up a little bit and do Control W to make a polygroup there. And I might do the same thing right here. Just draw a mask on this part. Control W to make a polygroup. So what I'm going to do is when I Z-remesh with the polygroups on, it will create edge loops around these masks, which can help control the topology a little bit better. There's other ways using like these Z-remesh guides and all that kind of stuff, but I think polygroups are super fast and easy, so that's why I tend to prefer this method. All right, so something like that. I turn on keep groups. We're down about 43,000 points, so I'm going to do Z-remesh in half. You can see how it's created edge loops for the most part around the eye. It kind of keeps spiraling under control. And let's get this down even lower. Now we're down to about 8,000 points. Let's see if one more, how that looks. That's pretty good. That's nice and low poly. Something we can work with. And now I'm going to do Control D to subdivide it. And I'll get my highest subdivision level up to about 3 million. So now we have a nice model with OK topology that goes from 3,000 points up to 3.5 million. And if I want to bring back some of that detail, the symmetrical detail, I can go down here to projection. I stored that history point right here, and I'll hit project history. It's going to project the history back onto the model. Right there. So I have some of that form coming back. All right, so we have the head in a decent state right now. I'm not going to worry about the details just yet. I want to make sure that I get the rest of the model in a similar state. That being OK topology and subdivisions. So let's save this as version 3. Saved it as version 0. I want version 3. There we go. Okay. And so we're going to repeat this process for the other parts of the model. So let's continue with the parts of the head. So here's our original head. This is the asymmetrical version, right? You can tell because the mandibles are off a little bit. Here's our symmetrical head with subdivisions. This is our mouth parts. I'm going to deal with that a little bit later. Let's do the antenna next. And there's lots of different ways to go about working with the insect antenna, depending on what your final goal is. We could make a different mesh section for each segment here so that they fit in with each other. That could be really good if you're doing like rigging and you want to animate them curling and all that kind of stuff. Or we could keep this as one or maybe two pieces, solid pieces, and with just sculpted detail showing the subdivisions there. That could be good if you're doing 3D printing and you need an entirely closed mesh, watertight mesh. I am not decided yet. I think what I do want to do is I want to separate this part right here from this part. And in the back of my mind, I do remember that the specific term for this, I just can't remember right now. Hopefully the audio is not too bad. You guys can hear me. Just realized my microphone was all the way over there. So let's do this. First, let's get rid of any stray parts. So again, I'm going to turn on this material so it's easier to see the polygroups. I'll go down here to polygroups and I'm going to do, well, quick save. I'll do a auto groups and then delete only the stray parts that are hanging around. Then I'll create a polygroup for this part and separate this into a separate subtool. Or sometimes you could separate it into a separate mesh and keep it as one subtool. I do that for the legs. I think I might do that for the antenna as well. But I'll do auto groups here. And you can see it's created auto groups, but since I have these separated right here, they're kind of set one polygroup for this antenna, one polygroup for this antenna. So I'm going to go here and choose merge similar groups. So it uses the point count of the groups to merge them. So now I have one polygroup for the main part of the antenna, but you can see there's random other little bits and pieces right here. So I'm going to Control-Shift click on this. That hides everything except for that polygroup, so those little bits are hidden. They're still there, they're just hidden. But I'm going to go in here in Geometry, Modify Topology, Delete Hidden. So that gets rid of all those other little stray parts. Let's go back to our white material. Now if I do close holes right now, I could do that, but this thin part right here is going to cause some issues. So I think what I'm going to do is I am going to make this part a separate subtool, at least for now, and then I'll show you how I can deal with this so I can get a solid object from these parts right here. So let's first, I'm going to hide, whoops, I'm going to go into Select Lasso and hide this. And then I'm going to paint a mask right here. This mask right here. All right. Control W, and Control Shift click on this. There we go. And now I'm going to do split hidden again. You can always merge these subtools again later after we fix some stuff. I'll do a split hidden. And now I have this part, and I have this part. Let's go down here. I want to close this off, but I'm going to get some weird geometry there, so let's do this. I'm going to hide. Let's go back to Select Lasso, hide some of this right here, just to make it a little bit easier. And hide this. And I'll do another delete hidden. Now I could do close holes or I could just go straight to Dynamesh. You do Dynamesh, it's going to close the holes automatically. If I do close holes, I get this. That's not bad. And that kind of works. The other thing I could do is if I want to kind of fill in this part here a little bit better, you could go in here to like an insert mesh brush and maybe insert a sphere just so you have a nice closed. This is helpful, especially if you're going to do 3D printing. I could just squish this in here a little bit, just like a ball of clay. I'll do this a lot with the other part of the antenna. This one is not as crucial because the closed holes kind of does a decent job of preserving the overall shape. But, you know, just to demonstrate in a simple surface here. Alright, now Control Drag to clear the mask, and I can go in here to Dynamesh. Let's set this to like 512, which seemed to work for the other model. There we go. That closes the surface, and I'll just quickly go in here and so let's talk about Z-remeshing this real quick. So this is a something where it would be benefit from doing polygroups before you do Z-remesh, because then I can get nice, neat topology that goes, you know, edge loop that goes around each one of the edges of these sections. That'll make it easier to sculpt and control. So I'm going to do Control W to create a polygroup for everything. Let's turn on that white thing, and then I'm going to go in here and Control W to polygroup that. Actually, let's do this. Control Shift X just to go up a little bit. There we go. It's actually a faster way to do this. Let's do this. I'm going to do hide this part, Control W. Hide this part, Control W. Okay, let's redo that. Hide this part, Control W. Control W. Control W, Control W, hold the space bar, move that up a little bit, Control W, whoops, hold the Alt key, Control W, Control W. Now I have polygroups for all these different parts. They're not super neat, but that's okay. I'm usually, the reason I'm creating these polygroups is just to kind of help guide the retopology when I use Z-remesh, because now I'll go down here to Z-remesh. Let's do this. Control click on here, just so we can store this in undo history. Turn on Z-remesh, keep groups, set this to half, and turn off adaptive. Now you can see how it's creating edge loops that go around pretty well without creating too many spirals, because this is the kind of thing where spirals could easily be made by Z-remesher, and spirals are going to make life difficult when we wanted to like create UV coordinates. This also makes it easier if we do decide to separate these into different pieces here and close them off later. It makes it a little bit easier to do that. So this is down to 11,000. Let's go down even lower. That's pretty darn low. So now what I can do is Control D to subdivide, subdivide, subdivide. Just get it up there, it's nice and smooth, and then I'll go in here and do project. Project history, there we go. Our detail is back, but we also have decent topology. If I did a hand retopology on this, I don't know that it'd be that much different, right? We can divide a few more times and do another project history. And there we go. So we have that part of the antenna. Now we can go to this part of the antenna. So this one's a little bit trickier just because we have these big holes in here. So again, let's start just what we did before. Let's get rid of any stray pieces of geometry that might make closing the holes difficult. So I'll go down here to polygroups, do auto groups, and then merge similar groups. So these are the same polygroup. Switch over to select rect, Control Shift click on this. That just hides any little individual pieces that there are on polygroups. You could also try merge stray groups, but I don't really care about that at this point. I'm just going to go in here and choose geometry, modify topology, delete hidden. Okay, so there aren't any other stray polygons we have to worry about, so that's fine. Okay, so now let's go in here, and I'm going to do a little bit of cleanup and then fill in these parts with some geometry just like I did before, and then do a Dynamesh. So let's do control, whoops, let's go to select lasso. Just get rid of some of this stuff. Okay, delete hidden. Let's go in here with our insert primitives, pick a sphere, and draw a sphere right here. Select our move tool. Let's start moving this around. I'll just cover this up a little bit. We'll be doing some sculpting later on, but that's okay. That's where all the fun is. This is all the eating your vegetables before you get to the dessert. The dessert is sculpting, in my opinion, especially details. I love details. That's where the fun is. But I don't know if we'll get to that today. We're just mostly cleaning up and preparing the model today. So we got that. Let's add another sphere in here. You could also use Sculptress mode in here if you wanted to. Let's try that just for fun. Well, it's not really going to work with the move brush, but you know, whatever. The main point is just to close off this geometry with something that when you Dynamesh, it creates a cleaner and easier to work with model. It has fewer errors and makes it easier to ZBrush and so on. So Dynamesh and ZBrush are tools at your disposal. They don't have to be used in any particular order. I usually go back and forth all the time. Use them enough so that you understand where their strengths are. Dynamesh is going to give you a nice closed off meshes that are easier when you're kind of working out the primary and secondary forms. ZBrush is going to give you an easier topology to work with that allows you to subdivide. The subdivisions make it easier to sculpt that primary, secondary, tertiary, whatever, all the way up to fine detail. So I use Dynamesh when I'm sketching things out in 3D and ZBrush when I'm refining the model, if I want to put it in the most simplistic terms possible. There are other purposes. You don't really want to create UVs for a Dynamesh model. That would be messy. So UV texture coordinates are important for texturing, and ZBrush is the easiest way to create UV texture coordinates. Decent topology. In the models that you see in the New York Times article, I can't tell you exactly how they did it, but I'm pretty sure they probably didn't go into this level of work on them. They probably got sort of decent looking topology going and then projected textures and painted textures on it. A lot of times the scan data, especially photogrammetry, the textures will come through as well, which can be really nice and make things easier. They're going to be okay textures and a little bit noisy and messy if you look at them really close up, but from far away they can look pretty good. Okay, we're going to call that good enough for Jazz, or good enough for Dynamesh. Let's see this end right here. We could stick a sphere in here to close this off, or just hope that Dynamesh does a decent job of it. But I'm going to stick a sphere in here. So this is just like blobs of clay. This is not like AutoCAD level of precision here. This is... You just want to create something that's going to be easier to sculpt later on. So close up those gaps. Okay. Now I can clear the mask. Go to Dynamesh. Let's set this to, what is it, 512. Look at that. Dynamesh. And I'm going to control click. Whoops, let's go to this history state. Control click on this history state. Store it. Let's do control W just to make one polygroup. Maybe what I'll do is I'm just going to create a quick polygroup for masking here. For this part. Control W. Control W. It's creating blue groups. Let's do that. Okay. Polygroups are there just to help control the topology as I go into ZBrush. So I'm going to keep groups, half, ZBrush, let's bring it down to like 1500 points or something like that. Just get in the ballpark. And then subdivide to like 300,000 and something around there. Project history, bring back some of that detail. Now we have a model with okay topology and subdivision. So we might want to, let's save this real quick. We might want to merge those parts of the antenna together. The trick when merging two different subtools that have subdivision levels is you want to make sure they have the same number of subdivision levels before you merge them. Let's turn off the grid for a second. So this part of the antenna, if we take a look, has 5 levels of subdivision. This part of the antenna has 6 levels of subdivision. So let's go to this one and just subdivide it one more time. Control D. So now it has 6 levels of subdivision. Both of these have 6 levels of subdivision. So before you merge, let's do this. Before you merge subtools, it's a good idea to save because it can't be undone easily. So what I want to do is merge these down, but I want to keep their subdivision levels. So go to the highest subdivision level for everything, and then this one selected, I'll choose merge down. And let's see, if we go down to geometry, yeah, it kept the levels of subdivision. So I have my 6 levels of subdivision, and then now this is one subtool with polygroups. So that works pretty well. And let's name this. So this is what it's all about, cleaning up. This is why, despite what the New York Times says, you can't just go straight from this to this. There's still work involved that involves an artist, right? So let's save this guy. Let's see if it is 4. Fascinating stuff, I hope. So now let's see where we're at. We got our original head right here. Asymmetrical head from the scan. We got our symmetrical head with not a lot of detail, but subdivision levels and OK topology. And we've got our antenna right here, same thing. Decent topology, levels of subdivision. Let's do our mandibles. So, repeat the process. Let's go in here and do a quick auto groups. Merge similar groups. Control Shift click on this to hide any stray parts. Go to geometry, modify topology. Let's see if I can get that out. Escape button is not working. Sorry about that. Take a moment to reflect on the beauty of ants. Ants are wonderful. Ants are far more interesting than most people realize. Delete hidden. Okay, so we don't have any stray polygroups there. So, what I'm going to do is just use a, let's clean this up a little bit. Just these little stray bits here and there, not too many of them. So go geometry, delete hidden. We could just do close hole, see what happens. That's not too bad. I think we can sculpt, do a Dynamesh and then sculpt that a little bit. So let's control click on the undo history right here just to store this state. And we'll choose Dynamesh. I'm going to set this to maybe a little bit higher. Let's do like 650 or something like that. Dynamesh. I'll just smooth this out a little bit. I like to use the inflate brush just to thicken up any thin parts. Make it easier to re-Dynamesh. And then ZBrush. We can smooth out any part that looks like it's not actually part of the anatomy. This looks like part of the mouth parts that got fused in with the mandibles. I don't think that's actually part of the mandible. If I'm wrong, let me know, but I think that's not right. So we might have to go back and find out what's going on with that mouth part. But right now I'm going to just smooth it out. Thank you, Duolingo. Starting to feel like Duolingo is qualifying as a stalker. constantly sending me notifications and passive-aggressive messages, so I don't really appreciate it. Clay tubes. Let's just squish this down a little bit. Making educated guesses about what's part of the mandibles and what's actually not. These are part of the mandibles as far as I can tell, but some of these little random bulges are probably not. They could be erroneous scan data, or they could be part of the ant that's too close and got squished. You can always go back to our original scan data or find references online to find out what's going on with that. At this phase, I don't worry about that too much, because I know it could be easily added in later. So that's pretty good. Let's add a little bit to this, just so it actually goes into the head with some geometry. Hello, welcome to the live stream. Working on ants today. Scan data. Okay, so actually I'm going to store this in history. Control click on that and then do a ZBrush. Set this to half. We can do this. Create a poly group there. And I'll do keep groups. And ZBrush. Later on, we get to the sculpting phase. We'll put in all the wonderful sharpness and nasty little teeth and all that kind of stuff. Ants are vicious, so we're going to make sure that they come across that way. I'm going to turn off. Whoops! I didn't mean freeze groups. I meant keep groups, not creases. Groups. This one right here. Let's try that again. That's better. Yeah, I'll just bring this down to say, yeah, like that's low poly enough, I think. Control D to subdivide. Get it up to, I don't know, 1.9 billion is good enough for now. And go down here to project and do project history. So let's see what we got. Here is our cleaned up head. Not a lot of detail, but it will be much easier to sculpt in the detail. And then here's our original scan data. So as far as these mouth parts go, I'm just going to do a real quick cleanup on them and worry about the details later. So I'm just going to get rid of some of these little stray points right here. And we'll do geometry, modify topology, delete hidden. Let's see, if I do a Dynamesh at 512, let's see how that looks. Let's bring it up. That's good. Do a quick inflate on some of these parts. These smaller mouth parts are something I'd probably save to the very, very end. If you're doing something for a client and they constantly want to see progress, then you probably want to spend most of your time on the bigger parts and save the smaller parts for later. So to allay their fears, because some clients are nervous Nellies. Okay, let's store this history state. Let's re-Dynamesh, and then I'm going to Alright, just make some polygroups to help control the topology. This right here, make a single polygroup with that. There we go. And go down to ZBrush. Let's store the state and history. And keep groups. Control D to subdivide. Subtool. Project history. Super fast. And there we go. So that to me says that the head for the most part is done, at least for now. We'll deal with the detailing and the sculpting and all the fun stuff later on. We've got a decent head that's symmetrical. Has okay topology. Good enough for jazz. And ready for sculpting later on. So really, that entire process that I've shown you for the past 90 minutes or so, we're just going to repeat that for the rest of the body. Some parts are going to be easier than others, but the idea is just this is what cleanup is all about. And then after you clean up everything, we and make everything symmetrical, we can sculpt in details. So I'm going to save this. And let's take a look at the thorax. So here is the thorax. This is in the asymmetrical state, somewhat aligned to the grid. Fairly close anyways. So just as I did before, I'm going to duplicate the subtool so I have a backup. Let's create a folder called Thorax. This is one piece, so it's going to be fairly quick. So, and the one piece is real. So this is our backup. This is the one that we're going to retopologize. So let's rename this so we just know. We'll call this Thorax Original. So I'm going to take this thorax and let's start by doing a mirror and weld. That's not bad. Undo that, you can see it's pretty close to the center line. So that's good. So we'll do mirror and weld. And you can see we're not getting like, it's not doing, you know, this kind of thing where it's off center. We're getting this kind of doubling, or this where it's like super thin. Essentially, we are doing a mirror and weld from the positive side to the negative side. So there we go. So this side is being mirrored over to there. So that's pretty good. Good enough for our purposes. We can always fix mistakes later in the sculpting phase. Now, again, as was asked at the beginning of the session, now we're going to do the close holes. We can try just doing close holes right now to see what happens. It might get a little messy, but let's save it. And do close holes. So yeah, it's not great. Technically the holes are closed, but it's a little bit ugly. So I'm going to undo that. And I'm going to stuff some geometry in here to make the hole closing a little bit easier. Also, we can get rid of some of these stray parts. So let's do this trick again where we get rid of any stray bits. Sometimes they're hard to see. In this case, that one's easy to see, but there might be others. So I just use this flat shaded material with the poly frame on because it's easier to see. And I'll go into polygroups and choose auto groups. So you can see, yeah, there's a few pieces here and there, stray bits that we want to get rid of. So I'm going to Control-Shift-click on this to hide all those other groups, and then I'll do Geometry, Delete Hidden. Now we just have one piece of geometry that we can be fairly certain about. This might solve some of our close hole issues. Let's see. Now we got some thin parts that are causing some issues. So I'm going to turn on Symmetry, and I'm going to go in here, find my Insert Primitives brush, and just insert a sphere right here, and then use the Move brush to kind of squish it into place. Just to make it easier to close holes, because if we have some of this thin geometry, that's what's making it difficult. Like this right here is what's causing the issues when we try and close holes. Just pull that out to the edges. Smooth. Let's do get the inflate brush. Inflate this. We want to create this so that they're overlapping in the middle, so that when we Dynamesh, they fuse into a single part. I know I need to put some of these brushes down on my interface. I'll do that eventually. You know, you can test the close holes as you go, or the Dynamesh as you go, if you're in a hurry, so that you don't have to spend too much time doing this. And I know that this part's going to cause problems. The cool thing about this scan data is, so a couple years ago when I did that workshop with Thomas Vanderkamp, the guy who's sort of leading these techniques for scanning, he was talking about how they were actually making the 3D scans of these bugs were actually leading to genuine scientific discoveries, which is really cool. So for example, when he was scanning a weevil, the scans would actually create, this particular scan doesn't have the interior anatomy, but sometimes they do. It was actually creating the scans of the interior anatomy, and he could see that, you know, a weevil will bring its legs in very tight to the body and make it a watertight surface. Insects don't like to get water on the inside of the body because that leads to infection. So a lot of their anatomy is designed to prevent that. So the weevil, it actually, when it brings its legs in, it has kind of like a corkscrew kind of action on the interior that was never seen before until they actually made a scan of it. People didn't know that it actually existed. We did, and it looks just like something you'd see like when you're putting together IKEA furniture or something, like those little weird little corkscrew things that tighten up the surface. It was really cool. So this whole idea of using scan data of insects is not just to create cool models for the sake of looking at them or animating them. It can actually lead to real scientific discovery as well. In many ways, it's like the next generation of microscope, and of course, microscope is what led to the scientific revolution in the first place. The ability to actually see the unseen for the first time. So we have some gaps in here we're going to close up a little bit later. So it's very exciting. And I've done enough insect models based on just illustrations and looking through a microscope, and it's okay, but it's tough, and it still leads to a lot of errors because it's difficult to understand what you're seeing unless you have an expert who's been doing it their whole career next to you to let you know what's the actual anatomy, what's not. The other problem with using illustrations is that a lot of illustrations are copies of other illustrations that were created hundreds of years, or 100 years ago, not hundreds, but like 100 years ago. So for bee anatomy, for example, there were a lot of really great illustrations that were created in the early 20th century, and until we had 3D scanning and that kind of thing coming along, illustrations for the most part were just copies of other illustrations. And also, if you're looking at a 2D illustration, the detail is left out for the sake of clarity for the anatomy for scientific purpose, but it can make it really difficult to see what the actual three-dimensional look of the object is. I know when I was doing honeybees, working on the mandibles based on illustrations or even looking at them through a microscope, it's really hard to get an understanding of what the three-dimensional shape of the mandibles were until I got some high-quality scan data, literally scan data from the same group that I'm working with now, Thomas Vanderkamp and his group. And once I had that, it completely changed the way that I saw parts of the anatomy, with in particular the mandibles. I was getting a lot of stuff wrong, which I didn't realize until I saw the 3D scan data. So it's really cool. It doesn't necessarily replace 3D artists in terms of sculpting. That's still necessary, at least for a while, until artificial intelligence gets really good. But then we'll be obsolete, but who knows where we'll be at that point. But at least for now. Okay, so the question is, how does one scan such a thing as a bug? That's sort of the whole inspiration for this live stream, because over the weekend, the New York Times came out with an article. You've never seen ants like this before. And this article is talking about the new technology that has been used by Thomas Vanderkamp and his group at Biomedia to create high-quality scans using really like a using the synchrotron particle accelerator. And that's the short answer to your question. Synchrotron particle accelerator in the southwest Germany. There you go. Grab yourself one of those for a couple $1 million or more, and you'll be on your way. Or what you can do is you can go to the free resource and download these scans for free and work with them in ZBrush. And there are, I think there's hundreds if not thousands already available. If I scroll to the bottom of this list, there's a button that says show all, and watch what happens to my scroll bar. So download all of these and work on them in ZBrush. I think there's a couple thousand, and you'll be on your way to having quite the library. No, I'm just kidding. One of these can take a while to do, but it's a great way to learn insect anatomy, and it's a great way to create high-quality models. So hopefully that answers your question. So big brain words. Well, I like big brain people. If you really want to get into big brain words, study sociobiology and the evolution of social behavior in insects, as led by people like E.O. Wilson and others. Really fascinating topic. And you talk about the Hamilton equation and adaptive radiation and so on and so forth. Use sociology, use social behavior. Or you could just look at ants and say, man, they're cool. But I think a lot of people think that there are like red ants and there are black ants or brown ants. In reality, there are tens of thousands of species. I think there's some 20,000 species that we've identified in science, but there are many, many more out there. You see, keeps going. This will keep you occupied for a weekend. Okay, so let's continue with that. But I just started on this one this morning, a couple hours ago, and getting close to actually having the basic blockout done in just a couple hours. So I'm going to continue this next week because I'm coming close to the end of this week's live stream. So I've done this before where I've taken the model and, all the way from scan to finished model. As I mentioned, I've done from scan all the way to 3D print. These are models that I made based on scan data that have been 3D printed for museums. So you can see this is the end result. These have been posed, but it's a really cool process. And I haven't seen this in person, but I really love to because it's awesome to see your ZBrush model that size, especially in Ant. These 3D prints were created by CDM Studio Perth in Australia, and they do a lot of stuff for museums. They're an amazing group. They do life-size whale 3D prints. That's a lot of resin, I'll tell you what. Okay, so what I'm going to do is let's shift this, and I'm going to try and do a Dynamesh just to see what happens. So I'll clear we still have some open holes, but maybe the Dynamesh will take care of it. Let's set this up to like 1024 and do a Dynamesh. That's okay. I think we can sculpt some of those issues out of there. So what I'll do is I'm going to do a modify topology, mirror and weld, another Dynamesh, and then just quickly go in here. Let's store this state history. Whoops, not that one, this one. And we'll just smooth this. I'm using flake brush to close up some of these holes. This is the bottom of the ant, so alright, control drag and release. And you can see and clean this up. A lot of these blobby things can be sculpted out later. That's why, of course, I always keep that original available so I can see what's supposed to be there and what's not there. Let's get the clay tubes brush here. This is the hole where the legs come out, so get some extra stuff there we don't need. Just gonna get rid of this stuff, clean it up. If you check out my YouTube channel on bloopatone, I do have a series where I actually did a bumblebee, starting with a scan to a finished model. That's a time lapse. I'm going to create some more time lapse based on this Ant Lab data. So you can see if you want to kind of review. It's time lapse, so it's going to be very fast, but this is obviously a little bit slower, and I'm showing you all the steps on the way. So, okay, so we have that. It's pretty good. Let's store this history state, actually, and then I'm going to do a quick ZBrush. Let's do this real quick. I'm going to do just going to create some quick polygroups here to help control the topology. sticks. Just leave it. I'll paint a mask right here. Just in a place I think it'd be nice to have some kind of edge loop. Okay. Super fast. Now let's go to ZBrush. Turn on keep groups. Set this to half. I don't care about adaptive. If you're talking about, yeah, these are definitely mine. The New York Times one, I don't want to take credit for. I didn't do these. Somebody else did these, but I did do these, as well as a whole bunch of others. I don't want you to give any misleading impressions of what I've done and what I haven't done. So let's do this. ZBrush at half again. No, I really want to go, if I get a chance and get the money, I'll go out to Australia and actually see that museum exhibit in person so I can see my little babies. I have to get a new 3D printer too, so I can actually print some of them up. So now I have kind of very low poly mesh, okay, topology, just like we've done before. Now I'm going to subdivide. Bring it up to 2.1 million is fine for now, and then I'll do project history. And there we go. So, and what I'm going to do when I sculpt the details, I'm going to clear out some of this symmetrical detail and then use my original thorax as a guide to create the asymmetrical detail, because that's more realistic and more interesting. But symmetry is important when you're just doing getting the topology down and you're getting it prepared for rigging and that kind of stuff. So this is what we've got so far. I did the head and the thorax today, and I separated the different parts. I have to work on the abdomen. So this is what I started with this morning, and this is where I'm at now. So I'll continue with this next week, same time, and sort out legs and the abdomen and the PDO, and then start sculpting detail back in here. We'll use the original, project some of that stuff on there. It should be fairly quick, actually. Is the pointy bits on the top of its head? You know, what's really cool about ants is some of them have a lot of pointy bits. This one has some on the pedial and the thorax, but if you look at like leaf cutters, they've got all kinds of sharp, pointy, sticky things, which are really cool. And a lot of these, you know, this kind of detail right here, you might be wondering why this exists on an ant. Some ants are totally smooth, some have all kinds of bumps on it. In those ants that live in large colonies, especially the ants that actually farm fungus underground, it's very important that anybody who's tried to grow mushrooms knows that bacterial or other fungal infections can be devastating when you're trying to grow mushrooms. So like leaf cutters, the reason they cut leaves is they cut the leaves, they bring them back to the nest, they chew them up, and they use the leaves as basically their substrate for growing fungus. And this fungus that they grow is what they feed to the larvae to keep the colonies going. See, ants are really, really fascinating this way. So they had to protect against fungal infections. So there's often a symbiotic relationship between insects and certain types of bacteria that can be used as antifungal agents. So there's a lot of really cool symbiosis going within a single ant colony. If you look at a leaf cutter, there's a symbiosis between the ants and the fungus, but also the ants, the fungus, and bacteria. And you even have a symbiosis between the ants and the plants. So you basically have pretty much all the branches of life working together or working against each other, depending on which side you want to take, if you want, of the war against infection. So it's really fascinating to see how all these things go together. And a lot of times these divots and these impressions and this kind of detail on the surface of the ant helps to trap the kind of bacteria that they want, that they find is beneficial as a fungicide on the ant, so that when they go in the subterranean areas, they can keep the good fungus sterile and keep the bad fungus out. So it's really fascinating. So pretty cool. All right, guys, thank you for joining me this week. I hope you enjoyed this, and it's always nice to do something that's topical and in the news. I'll continue with my character as well the coming weeks, but I wanted to shift into ant territory because ants are what first got me excited about doing entomology and doing bug sculpts. So I'm really excited to see that they're in the news again, and I hope this is helpful. And